I do. I picked the best one, at least I try to. It's just that they need to see this too, up there versus, you know. Okay, rules. First rule, don't touch stuff in my kiln. Okay, right, you already know this. There's lots of reasons why. You don't know if it's been fired, not been fired, hot, you don't know. Second rule is be careful. And the third rule is clean hands, super important. I just ate a, way over there. I just ate a caramel. My hands have grease on them, so I've got to wash my hands. So the same thing goes for you. If you just came back from lunch and you haven't washed your hands, make sure you do. Grease and water don't mix. Okay. If you want, when you go to grab your plate, you can also grab a paper towel. Okay, and then you can pick it up. So that's all the rules I'm going to tell you right now. And then I'm just going to kind of run through this. So I found my plate. Your plates will be here right in the B3 section, and there's some out already. So clean hands, be careful. Please make sure our phones are put away. This is stuff that if you mess up, you're going to ruin your stuff and maybe somebody else's. So I'm going to come over here. And we're doing clear glaze. And the clear glaze is right here. On the bucket, it says Coyote Clear. And I always try to keep it right to the right. So that's where the clear glaze will be. There are other glazes. We'll talk about those later. All glazes need to be mixed. So we're going to use a okay, it's been mixed a couple times today. It doesn't take much. And then I'm going to pour. So this could be a dipping glaze or a pouring glaze. And then we'll talk about paint on glazes in a second. I know this is chunky, but it's just clear glaze. If this has any other color in it that doesn't look like this, please wash it out before you dip it in my clear glaze. And we're going to dip it. I'm going to hold it up here. I'm just going to pour it over 2/3 of my piece. Shake that off. And you can see up on the edge there how fast that's going to start to dry. And it's really important as it starts to go that you're paying attention. If it's not drying that fast, if it takes well over a minute to dry, there's something wrong. Okay, with the glaze, with your plate, with the universe, I don't know. But that's that. Okay. Another rule, never touch wet glaze. So I kind of have a drip down here, some other stuff happening. If you touch wet glaze, you're going to muck it up. You're going to make it worse. So if there's a problem, let it dry. We can come in, we can take it off, we can buff it out, we can do lots of things, but never touch wet glaze. So that's almost dry. Next rule, when in doubt, come and find me and ask the question if you don't know something, okay? Instead of just assuming you know what you're gonna do, well, I missed something, I'm gonna pour more on there. That's a problem, okay? Don't do that. Okay, we're gonna come over. Pour on there. It's really important that we are careful to pour. Anything that gets on the bottom has to be wiped off. It's not a big deal. It's just that anything that sits on the table or on my shelf has to be clear of glaze. I'm gonna put my lid on it. And then I'm going to set this over here while it dries. Now, okay. All right, so there's a few things I can fix on here. Most of them will melt. So we're just going to set that aside for a second. Okay, so that is how we glaze a plate. Now let's talk about glaze, and then I'll glaze a plate again. And we'll kind of go from there. So, I'm going to ask this question. What is paint? Do you know what paint is? Glue? It's not glue, although it might stick some stuff together. Paint is this. Paint is a binder and a pigment put together. Okay? Could be any number of binders. Anyone heard of watercolor? Water and a pigment. These pigments could be man-made, they could be natural. So you could go out and find some sort of like iron ore. You mix that up, you put it in with water, get it nice and smooth, and you've got yourself kind of a reddish color. Okay, it could be all the way to black. Acrylic paint, it's a binder, which is a plastic, and the pigment put together. You go down to the Lowe's and you're going to get latex. That goes on your walls. Latex, which is also a rubber or a plastic, and you put a pigment in it to make colors. And there's oil, and there's a few others out there. Now, it's a visual or optical thing. Take you back to kindergarten. You're sitting in afternoon kindergarten, you just had your nap, you wake up, and they're like, "What's crayon time?" And you're taking your crayons and you're throwing down some yellow, like this. And then you pick up your blue, throw that right down over the top, and what color do you have? Green, right? The translucentness of the blue on top of the green mixed together, or the yellow creates green. Okay. Paint is a binder and a pigment. Glaze is not that. Okay, glaze is a chemical reaction. And it's materials mixed together, applied appropriately, fired to a specific temperature to get your desired result. So, the actual definition of a glaze is this. Glaze. A thin glass or glass-like surface coating applied to clay forms to color, decorate, waterproof, give surface treatment, strengthen, smooth, or seal the pores. Glazes are composed of three components: glass formers, which is silica, flux, sodium, potassium, calcium, boron, magnesium, lead, lithium, and that helps to bring the temperature of your silica down so that you can melt it, and a stabilizer, something like alumina. I call this stabilizer a binder. That's a definition of a glaze, but I want you to think about what I said just a second ago. Glaze is a recipe. It's materials mixed together, applied appropriately, fired to a specific temperature to get the desired result. Okay? Anyone like cookies? Okay. Cookies. Pull out the recipe. You get the materials, you put them in a bowl, you mix them together, correct? Sometimes in a specific order. Then you take it and you put them on a cookie sheet, and it says, put them in 1-inch globs, or whatever it says. Then you fire them, 350, 375, and for a specific time, and after 11 minutes or whatever, you pull them out, you let them cool for about a minute, and then you have a nice warm cookie, right? And if you follow those directions every time you'll get pretty much the same cookie, correct? Okay. Glaze is the same way. It's materials mixed together, applied appropriately, fired to a specific temperature to get your desired result. Now, there's 4 kinds of glaze in this class. We have the underglaze, which we've used already, that has very little glass former in it. If I fired this plate just like it is, it would come out pretty much just like it is. It wouldn't look shiny. Okay, so underglaze. We have paint on glazes. Now don't get them confused with paint, but you use a brush. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of colors in here. Then we have pouring and dipping glazes up here. And we're going to start out with our pouring of the clear glaze because it's simple. It's easy to do. As we move into our mugs, which I'm going to start today, we'll start talking more about and applying those. But let's look at some glazes real quick. Okay, here's a glaze. What color is that? Copper. Okay. What color is that? River rock. It's kind of a green, right? Okay. What color is that?
Ochre.
Ochre, or kind of a yellow color. And what color is that? Blue. Okay, so let's, what color is this?
Copper.
What color is it? What color is it? But what color is it?
Copper.
It's copper. What color is it? But what color is it?
River rock.
River rock. Let's keep going.
Orange.
Kind of an orangey red, but it comes out like that. So here's another one that's kind of wild. What color is that?
Blue.
Blue. What color is it?
Blue red.
Red. What color is that?
Blue.
Gray. So remember, glaze is a chemical thing. Okay? We take it, we apply it, we fire it, that heat changes it. But if we apply it wrong, or if the manufacturer in this case put the wrong materials in, it's not going to come out the way they say it is. But they say the materials that are in this bottle, when mixed appropriately, always put your finger on top of your bottle when you mix it. You don't want that to go flying off. Okay? When mixed appropriately, applied, this says applied 3 coats to a bisque piece. So if I take this and I put on 3 coats, and I fire it to cone 5-6, which is 2200 to 2230 degrees, that every time it'll come out really close to this. Okay, it's a recipe. These two are different glazes, although their colors are similar. These two started with the same base glaze, and then they added extra material. So the base glaze was kind of a clear, and then this one, they added some materials that turned it red, but when fired, turned it that ochre color. And then this one, they added materials that turned it yellow. Okay. And when fired, turns it that pear or yellow color. Is that making sense? Okay. It's a recipe. And you've got to follow the recipe. If you don't follow the recipe, you're going to run into problems. The glaze won't look right, and it won't function right. Okay, we'll set those aside. We're not doing colored glazes right now. They're a little more complex. Okay, now let's go back to getting our work. You come in, it's after lunch, and you're super excited, and there's some pieces up here. Here, I'll throw some of my pieces up here. And you have a few minutes before class, so you come in, and you start to go to take your piece. What's the first thing you need to pay attention to? Okay, other people's pieces is probably the second thing, but the first thing is something else. Remember I said clean your hands. Okay, make sure your hands are clean. They could be dry, and it's fine, you can make that decision, but if you just took off and you ate at McDonald's or Beto's or home, quesadilla, whatever, and you come in here without washing your hands and you grab this piece, that grease is going to cause problems for your glaze. Okay? Second thing is pay attention to yours and other people's work. They're in a stack right now. It would be really kind of lame if somebody just started like chucking them so you could get to yours. Be careful. Okay. Third thing before you glaze, you've got to make sure that your piece is fired. Just because it's up here does not mean it's fired. It doesn't mean it's not, it just means that it's up here. So you've got to make sure. So there's a bunch of ways to tell if it's fired. So let's look at this. I have 3 pieces. Which one's fired? My left? Your left? Your left?
You're right.
My right?
The small pot.
The one in the middle is not.
Yeah.
Okay. Which one's fired?
The one on the left.
Yeah.
The one on the left.
Which one's fired?
Right. All right.
Okay. So this is the same clay. This is not fired. This is fired. Okay. There's a difference. This is kind of tannish brown, light brown. This is kind of a pinkish white. This is fired, but it's a different clay. So it's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of a tannish as well, but with a little bit of hint of pink. So if you can't tell by sight, you can tell by sound. There's actually a feel too, but you can tell by sound just by holding it, also by flicking it. This one makes a better sound, but let's go with this one. Nice and dull. This one here. Okay. You can scratch it. If it's fired, it'll start scratching your fingernails. If it's not fired, it'll start scratching and the dirt will come off. Okay. They taste different. They really do. So this is dirt, right?
Bite it.
I don't want to bite it. I have lunch.
It's like chocolate, but
It just tastes like dirt.
we got the taste test.
No, but you can.
Let's look at the same spot.
No, gross. Ah.
Someone's gonna come in and lick that one that you just licked. And you're gonna be disgusted that you licked that. What if someone else already did?
I hate humanity.
How many
Okay.
times have you licked that today?
Twice now.
Oh.
And 3 times yesterday. Anyways. So it does have a taste that's different. That's not how we check. So sight, sound, and the third way, if you really don't know,
Is it temperature?
not temperature, ask. If you really don't know, you're brand new at this. It's okay if you're like, I think it's fired, but I don't know for sure. You're brand new at this. It's okay. Be like, Mr. Jones, is it fired? And I can probably tell you from across the room if it's fired or not. But just by holding it, can you hear that sound? The difference in sound. So there's lots of ways to tell. Not really a big deal.
Because there's less glass in the non-fired?
What was that?
Because there's less glass in the non-fired?
There's no glass in the non-fired. There's silica, there's sand. But when that sand is melted, that silica is melted, it becomes glass. So this is glass, that is not. Okay, so we make sure that it's fired. Okay, because if we don't, I made this cup last class period. Let's pretend that you know better than I do. And you come over here and you hurry and dip that in the clear glaze because you're super excited to get your cup done. And you sneak it into my kiln. And I'm doing a glaze firing tonight. I'm not, but maybe I was. And I fire that. Anyone want to guess what happens?
It'll blow up.
It blows up. Why?
Because the water content in the actual clay is getting stuck in
Okay. Absolutely right. The water content. Even in a bone dry piece. Okay. There's actual water and there's chemical water. And there's water in there. It's just not activated. And as that gets to boiling, it wants to escape. And if we ramp it up too fast, like we do for our glazed pieces, the pieces that are already fired, this will blow up. Well, it has glass on it, and that glass is melting, and it'll shoot over, and it'll hit other people's pieces, and it'll stick. It'll stick to my shelf, and it'll stick to the walls. It's kind of lame. But great thing is, because you're not allowed to touch my kilns, right? If this was up here and it was glazed, I would grab it, and I would take it and I would check the bottom, because we're gonna learn here right now, if there's any glaze on the bottom, it's gotta be wiped off. Because if that glaze is sitting on my shelf and it melts, it'll stick to the shelf, and when I go to pull this, oh man.
That'll happen.
Because you licked it.
Maybe that's why.
Maybe I just ruined it. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, it'll stick and then it'll break. Let's pretend that that piece was on there and it stuck and it broke, right? And now you did all that work to have a broken piece. So we got to follow the rules the best we know how.
Whose was that?
It was mine.
Oh, okay, that's where you looked it.
Yes.
That's 2 in this class and 0 in another class.
Okay, well, remind me next class.
If I remember, you have to remind me to remind you.
Okay. Now what? Okay. So on the glazes, as we have our pieces, we got to make sure our hands are clean, make sure we're being careful with other people's pieces. Plates are not as big of a deal, but when we get into mugs, handles are fragile. So be careful. Make sure it's fired. If you don't know, ask. And then we'll go from there. Oh, and this brings this up. There's some people who have not put their class period on their plates, which means I don't know where to put them. So they're just gonna sit around, and they're usually the ones that don't get their stuff done. So make sure you put your class period on your pieces. If you didn't, we'll get to it next time. Okay, let's do this again. So I have my piece. I know it's fired. Okay, visually it sounds good. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to glaze it. Now, what's my definition of a glaze? Materials mixed together, applied appropriately, fired to a specific temperature. So this is blue-green. We're not going to use this glaze right now. Yeah, that would suck. Can you see the layer of water up there? Someone go turn the lights off, please. Will you turn the light off? Okay. Can you see the layer of water in there?
Yes.
Okay, let me show it to you a little bit better. So, if we come in here, there's the water, and then there's all the material down in there. And I've got to stir that up. If I just took my piece and poured it or dunked it in there, there's 3 layers of material. Water, the flux, and then the colorant or the glass former is down at the bottom. And I won't get the right glaze, so I've got to stir that up. Okay, and I'm not going to stir it all the way because we don't need to see that. All right, someone hit the lights. So, we're going to stir this up. And we don't dunk this, at least I don't like to dunk it, because I don't want to have to wipe the whole bottom off. Okay, if you want to wipe the whole bottom off, go right ahead. But this way works really well. So I'm going to stir this. All the way down to the bottom. Okay, real quick. Yeah.
How quickly does it start to set? Like, else did it, or do you have to remix it?
I was just going to cover that. Great question. So, when something's stirred, if you saw them stir it and you trust their stirring abilities, you don't need to restir it. If you do it within about a minute. Clear glaze does not settle very fast. There's not any heavy materials in it. Red glazes settle fast because there's iron and things like that in it that's heavy and it drops to the bottom. There are things we can do to help suspend those materials. So a lot of glazes, you can go probably 1 to 3 minutes without remixing it. So my rule on that is, if you didn't see somebody mix it, or you don't trust their mixing abilities, you should probably mix it. If I just mixed it and you're right behind me, you can pretty much guarantee it's mixed correctly. Everyone close their eyes. Okay. So I'm going to pour this on, and I'm going to pour some on the back so that I can show you how to wipe it if you need to. So I'm going to pour it on the back. You don't need to pour it on the back. It's going to start to dry. Okay. However you hold it. This is your first warning on glazes, and red glazes particularly, they stain your clothes. So they'll stain your hands, they'll stain your clothes. So just be careful with them. If I were to mix up the red glaze and it flies all over the place, it's going to stain your clothes. This clear glaze will not. So we're getting it there, it's drying, should take a little bit. You can let it, you can set it down, whatever. But remember the rule on touching wet glaze? What is it? Don't. Okay, you're going to come back and finish it. If you're glazing this and you miss a spot, don't just pour onto it, because one pour gives you enough material for this recipe to work. We can come in with our finger or a paintbrush or lightly dip something to fix that. But that's the kind of thing, if you feel like you messed something up, before you try to fix it, come and find me, and let's come up with the best way to fix that. All right, finish my pouring on here. Pour out your measuring cup. Put your lid back on. And then this will dry here in a second. So while this is drying, again, I have to clean the bottom off. This one is not going to be a problem. If I set these together and I set the wet one down first and the dry one on top, my dry one is going to grab some of that glaze and pull it off. So never put anything on a wet plate. The dry one can come up here, and you're going to set them up here. No order, just stack them. Just like when you put your plates in this room here. If you can't find a spot, please come find me. We'll come up with a solution for you. Okay, that's almost dry. I'm going to go over here, grab a sponge. Get it wet, squeeze it out, and then I'm going to come in here and just wipe this clean. And a lot of times I'll have to rinse my sponge out again, and then hit that again. And anything that's going to touch the table has to be wiped off. So anything that's set in. And this is one of those things, if you have to wipe it off and you don't know if you got it all the way, again, you're brand new at this, feel free to come bring it to me and I'll look at it. I'd love to tell you if you need to wipe off more or if it's good. Okay, we're going to set this up here. You see where it says glazed pieces go here? Right? That's where glazed pieces go. The pieces that we're going to be glazing for that day, or putting in the glaze fire. Any questions on that? Okay. We will be glazing maybe a little bit Monday. It is a short day, a shorter day. because of mega makeup. All plates need to be glazed so I can get them fired by the end or at the end of next week. So I don't give you time in class, but glazing a plate is going to take you 30 seconds to a minute, right? It's not going to be a big deal. So you just clean up a couple minutes early, glaze your plate, and you're done.
How do you get rid of the thumb hold area where you're holding the plate?
It'll melt. Unless it was really wet where you put your thumb there, that little impression will melt and you won't notice
Okay,
it.
so it'll just like go over?
Yeah, I'm sure on this plate there was a thumbprint somewhere and it just melted. In theory, maybe not. Okay.